I've been thinking heaps lately about the word passion. It's probably one of the most used words in our Christian vocabulary, and probably one of the most misused words too. What I didn't realise was that the word passion, it actually finds its origin in the Latin word for suffering, which I guess means that passion is not so much about something you love, but maybe more accurately your willingness to suffer for something you love. But what does that mean for you and I? Well, what does it look like to be genuinely passionate for God? It actually reminds me of one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard from the persecuted church, of a Christ-centered passion, about this guy called Peter from North Africa. He was arrested when police stormed into the secret Christian gathering that he was attending. He was caught and held for 6 years without charge in some of the most horrific conditions I've ever heard of. On one occasion, Peter was locked in a cell so narrow that he could only lie down, essentially a coffin, for 5 months. They took him straight from this coffin and placed him in an underground cell, completely dark, and they left him there for a further 6 months. When they finally pulled him out of this hole, he said not only was he almost completely blind, but his legs were paralysed. And over the coming months, by the grace of God, he says, my sight returned and my legs were healed. The police would regularly pull him in and say, Peter, we want you to sign this piece of paper, which literally said, I will not speak about Jesus. I will not meet with Christians. And on each occasion, he would refuse to sign it. One day, Peter and 2 fellow Christian inmates resolved to escape. With no shoes and just the clothes on their backs, under a hail of gunfire, they ran for their lives. In fact, Peter didn't stop walking for more than 200 kilometres until he reached the relative safety of a refugee camp. And as he spoke about the last 6 years of his life, he said he realised that not only had he lost his freedom, but he lost time. He said, I'm almost 40 years old, I'm not trained, I'm not educated. I may never get married or have a family of my own. But then he stopped and smiled and he said, but I still have Jesus, and he's worth it all. It dawned on me recently that, well, I live as though Jesus Christ isn't coming back in my lifetime. And the impact that has on my faith, on my passion, it's crazy. Because if I'm honest with you, I've been living that style of faith for more than 30 years. Whereas the people I've met right across North Africa and people like Peter, they live as though Jesus Christ is coming back in their lifetime, with a willingness to suffer for God. It's almost as though in the middle of the valley of the shadow of death, they find the river of life, the one true God, Jesus, who before you were passionate for him, suffered because of his passion for you. If you knew Jesus were coming back in 10 days, what would change in your life? Because whether he is or isn't coming back in our lifetime, it shouldn't change a thing.